Does anybody see me? I'll wait around and see if anybody comments. Hang on a second. Let me just. Let's see. All messages are visible. First, hey, Big D, how's it going? I'm wondering how many people I'm going to get on this live stream. I've got 31. Mm, mm. And why am I doing this live stream? Oh, hang on a second. I wonder if uh, should I put these on or not? Can you guys hear me properly? Hit me with a +1 if you guys can hear me properly, and hit me with a 0 if you can't. Okay, so I guess all you guys can hear me properly, and I'm feeling very guilty about doing this stream, and I'll tell you why. I just did an Ask Me Anything, or not just now, a while ago, a few hours ago. I did an Ask Me Anything for my Patreon subscribers. By the way, for those of you who don't know, I'm in Kiev, Ukraine. I'm staying at the Premier Palace Hotel, right in the middle of Kiev, right in the middle of the Russian invasion, man. Woo! It's pretty damn funny. Oh, by the way, just to confirm, to show you, I'm live streaming, and so I'm in my bedroom, but let me, how do I change this? Oh, there we go. We change there. Oh, wait a second. Let me find. Oh, I have it in my pocket. Right. I was like looking for this, actually. Let me just show you that I'm actually in the Premier Palace Hotel in Kiev. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you the atrium. I'm not going to mention what floor I am, but I'm high up, and see if you can see that atrium down below. I'm zooming in. It's very distinctive, and it's got these elevators that go up to the ceiling that during the daytime, it's really lovely. And so you can see that down there, okay? Now, why am I pointing this out? So that you guys can check to see that I'm telling the truth. Because I'm so furious at this Jordan Schachtel guy who alleges that I'm lying about being in Ukraine and that I'm a troll who's, making stuff up. It just bothers me to no end, it just really, really pisses me off. And yeah, because I was gonna go on a Spaces to talk about my experiences in Kiev, in Ukraine, in the middle of the fucking war. And this asshole, as I get in, he says, "Oh no, he's not real. He's a troll. He's a liar," and he kicked me out, and he slandered me in front of 500 people. And that just really, really fucking pissed me off, man. Look, if you get slandered like that in front of 500 people, of course you're gonna get pissed off. And the thing that bothers me is that I know why. Because a while back, a couple of months ago, I was on a Spaces with some woman, I forget her name, Lackman or something like that, and talking about Ukraine. And she was an NGO, New World Order, kind of like Globo Homo, kind of that kind of Zogbot kind of thing, right? And I'm like, no, very negative on that crap. And she basically called me a Putin stooge. I'm like, when you disagree with the narrative, you're a stooge of Putin. And yeah, she kicked me out of this thing. And this guy, Jordan Schachtel, was on that Spaces. And he knew from the things I was talking about that I was really in Kharkov. He knew. But later, like yesterday, a couple of days ago, yesterday, yeah, whenever it was, I've lost track of time because time has just like flown in together because I'm stuck in this goddamn hotel during this invasion, right? But anyway, the point is that this guy, Jordan Schachtel, he He knows that I'm in Ukraine. He knows it for a fact. And he just wants to disqualify me because he doesn't like what I have to say, you know? That's how these people operate, you know? And they have a narrative. And I'll bet you anything that if you guys pressure him enough, he'll have me on. And you know how he's going to be? He's going to be silky smooth, like, oh, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Yeah. And he'll be like a big suck up because these people, they're arrogant, you know? They're incredibly arrogant when they think that they have the upper hand. But the second that they think that, you know, their position might be slipping, they become incredibly subservient. I mean, just total suck ups. They're not people of one line. And you have to always be careful of people who are not of one line. See, you meet a man and he treats, you know, a president or a waiter the same way, that's a man of one line. And you want to be around him. A man of one line is valuable, and you want to be a man of one line. But people like Jordan Schachtel, they're snaky. They're arrogant when they think that they're superior. They're arrogant and condescending and bullying and bastards. And then like all like conciliatory and deferential and docile when they think that you've got the upper hand. To all of them, I mean, to men like that, individuals like that, because they're not men, you just have to whip them. You've got to kick them hard, kick them in the teeth. And the thing is, see, when you do that and you show them strength, they get more docile. Yeah, that's a fact. You know, Jordan Schachtel. One day I'm gonna come across you. It's gonna be very, very unpleasant for you because I don't mind causing a scene. I don't mind. I don't give a fuck. Okay. Anyway, I'm addicted to the Twitter Spaces because I see all these blue check marks, and they're talking about Ukraine like they actually know what the fuck they're talking about, and what they're talking about is just so much bullshit. They just talk so much bullshit. They refuse to acknowledge why Putin is doing what he's doing. They seem to act like for no reason whatsoever, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. Like it was like, oh, out of the clear blue sky. And all the American people and the European people, like fucking NPCs, like fucking robots, they don't question this notion that Vladimir Putin is evil. It's just evil. You know, he just woke up one day and because he's evil, he decided, oh, you know, I'm going to invade Ukraine. Yeah, because I'm evil. What bullshit, man. I mean, come on. I mean, think here. You wake up in the morning and you're hungry. You're hungry because, you know, you slept a good 8 hours, you know, and you wake up and your belly's rumbling. And so what do? You get up and go to the kitchen and you're like, oh shit, I forgot to buy food. I don't have anything in the refrigerator. So fuck it. You throw some clothes on, you go out, you go to the shop nearby, buy some food, walk back home, and sit down and eat your food, right? Why did you go to the supermarket or the store or whatever? Well, because you were hungry. You were motivated. You had a reason to go to the store. You had a reason to not take a shower and just like throw on some clothes and just go. The reason was you were hungry. You were motivated, right? And it's a trivial incident, right? That you decided, shit, man, I'm fucking hungry. I'm not gonna shower. I'm not gonna shave, you know, I'm not gonna put on any deodorant or anything. I mean, the BO will just have to do. I'm just gonna throw on a t-shirt and jeans and a long overcoat and just rush out there to the shop, buy some food, come back and eat because I'm fucking starving, man. Right? You're motivated. Imagine going to war. Imagine you're not just the leader, but you have like a whole class of people, ministers and generals and undersecretaries and assistant ministers and all kinds of a whole bureaucratic apparatus. And you decide to go to war, but not only that, this entire bureaucratic apparatus of very smart people, I mean, these are capable people, okay? They're not fools. They're smart, educated. I mean, they got IQs up the wazoo. I mean, You take the average of these fuckers, they're probably 135 to 150 average. I mean, these guys are smart, okay? All of them are. When you get to that level in any country, the people who are going to be leading it, they're going to be, if anything, they're going to have IQ points. So all of these people with very high IQ points, incredible education, incredible experience, very capable individuals, they're all on board with the evil leader who wants to invade some poor innocent little country. And for no reason whatsoever, they decide to invade it. Does that make any sense to you? Does that make any sense whatsoever to you that all of these bureaucrats, these ministers, men with a lot of brain power, they all just decide to follow a leader off a cliff for no reason whatsoever? Does that make any sense at all? Or could it be, and I'm just spitballing here, could it be that the Putin and his whole merry gang, they decided to invade Ukraine because they had a really, really fucking good reason, or a series of reasons? Could it be that? I mean, riddle me this, Batman. Do you think possibly, maybe, just fingers crossed, maybe they had a reason for this invasion? Maybe, just maybe, I'm just spitballing here, but maybe they were provoked. And that it wasn't just like, hey, dude, man, I'm really bored this week. My hot young Russian mistress is away, in Milan shopping. I got nothing better to do. So let's go fucking invade Ukraine. Yeah, let's go. Dude, man, it'll be fun, man. We'll ride like a tiger truck and just like shoot shit with the 50 cal. It ain't gonna get laid this week, so they might as well invade a country. Do you think, honestly, that was the reason? Huh? Or could it be spitballing here, that, see, the idea of Ukraine joining NATO and NATO putting a bunch of nuclear weapons right on Russia's doorstep was something that the Russians were just not willing to do, or more correctly, not willing to let happen. You think that might have been it? You think that maybe they were thinking to themselves, these crazy fucking Ukrainians are being egged on by NATO and the European Union, and their president, Zelensky, is even talking about acquiring nuclear weapons for Ukraine, which would be aimed at Russia, and the flight time from Ukraine territory to Moscow is about 3 to 5 minutes. Do you think that maybe, just spitballing here, maybe they decided that they didn't want fucking nuclear weapons parked in their fucking front yard? Do you think maybe that was the reason? Back in 1962, well, I wasn't alive in 1962. I was born in 1968, but I heard many, many stories, and I've read many books, as a matter of fact, about a series of events that happened in 1962. They were called... they happened in the Caribbean. It involved this young president named Kennedy, that was it. Jack or John, something like that. Kennedy, and a country called the Soviet Union, and there were like some island. Oh, right, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was because the fucking Soviet Union put a bunch of intermediate range intercontinental ballistic missiles in fucking Cuba, America's front doorstep, and the United States freaked the fuck out. They freaked out so bad that they were willing to go to nuclear war right then and there over these fucking nukes. Yeah. And they put a blockade around Cuba. It was a whole fucking thing, man. And the United States, let me phrase it, the world, nearly came to a nuclear war over those nukes. Because the nukes in Cuba violated a key tenet of the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Now, mutually assured destruction, I'm going to have to set the phone down so I can explain it to you. It's very simple. See, And I hope my audio is all right. Let me adjust the camera there so I look handsome as possible, or at least less ugly than usual. Now, mutually assured destruction is this. See, you've got nuclear weapons, I got nuclear weapons, right? Okay, so what happens is, see, mutually assured destruction means if I shoot my nuclear weapons, it's going to take some time. It's going to take, an hour or so for the missiles to get. I mean, they have to go all the way around the world, right? I shoot my nuclear missiles and my radars are going to pick it up. And so I shoot my nuclear missiles. And what happens is that I shoot them in retaliation. Our missiles cross and we kill each other. Mutually assured destruction. And in game theory, it basically means that rational actors will never fire first. Because if somebody fires first, if this guy fires first, he shoots his missiles, the other shoots them in return, and they kill each other. If it's the other way around, if this guy shoots first, he shoots his missiles, this one shoots, and they kill each other. End of story, right? But see, if you have the missiles really close to the other guy, you can shoot him and destroy his own missiles before he has a chance to respond. See? That's why nuclear powers don't like it when you put nuclear missiles right close to them. Because, see, it eliminates the whole purpose of mutually assured destruction, or it eliminates the whole balance of mutually assured destruction. And that's why when the Soviets put nuclear missiles in Cuba, it freaked out the United States because it meant that the Soviet Union had a first strike capability. They could shoot first, turn the United States to glass, and the United States would not have the time to respond. Therefore, it incentivized the Soviet Union to shoot first. You see? And this is basic in the theory of mutually assured destruction. Of course, it's theory because so far we've avoided the practice of it. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, Ukraine, pushing to join NATO basically meant that NATO was going to put missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, perhaps intermediate range ballistic missiles. They could even be intermediate range missiles that were non-nuclear, that just had a regular payload, but it would make Russia incredibly vulnerable. And in fact, it would incentivize NATO to shoot first. Yeah, because see, when you shoot first in such a situation, you win. And so at any kind of crisis point, there'd be enormous temptation for the power that had the nukes closer to the enemy to shoot first. See? And this was known back in 1962. Hell, it was known in 1948 when George Kennan came up with the whole theory of mutually assured destruction. Okay? And in 62, it was proven. And all of a sudden, the Americans freaked out because they realized that if those intermediate range missiles on Cuba became operational, because they never really were operational, they came close, but they weren't operational. But had they become operational, it would have incentivized the Soviet Union to shoot them first. Mm-hmm. And that would have been the end of the United States. The United States would not have had the time to respond. Okay? And so Ukraine joining NATO is basically the exact same thing as the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, the thing is, see, the Russians decided that they weren't going to wait around for the missiles to actually be deployed to Ukraine. They figured, fuck it. We can't trust these fuckers. We can't trust the United States. We can't trust Europe. Their word means nothing. They keep telling us things and then lying to us or trying to blackmail us or giving us these bullshit sanctions. We can't trust these fuckers for any kind of diplomatic solution. And the Russians tried. They tried for 2 fucking decades, actually closer to 3 fucking decades. They kept insisting that they didn't want NATO expanding eastward. And the West promised them that they wouldn't expand eastward, but they did. They promised that NATO would never expand beyond the borders of Germany. And in fact, at first, there was even enormous debate as to whether NATO would station weapons in East Germany. In the reunified Germany, there was debate as to whether they would put them in East Germany. But then what happened was that, as the years evolved, NATO just became more arrogant. The United States became more arrogant. And they kept moving the frontier of NATO eastward. And they kept saying that it's a defensive alliance. Okay, that's perfectly fine. But what are you defending against? We're just defending. Okay, against what? Well, there are no enemies. Well, there's one big country that's not a member of NATO. So I guess, we're not trying to do anything. But why is Russia so upset with us expanding? So I guess we have to get even closer to Russia and become more powerful to deter Russia from attacking us. So we defend against Russia. So Russia is the aggressor. Basically, that was the logic of it. Mhm. And Russia realized all of a sudden that NATO is not a defensive pact. No, they realized this when the whole Kosovo thing happened. When Bill Clinton got caught getting his dick sucked by Monica Lewinsky and he needed a geopolitical distraction, they got involved in the whole destruction of Yugoslavia and they bombed Belgrade for 75 days straight, mhm, and caused a huge humanitarian crisis. And the Russians never forgot that. And then NATO, what did NATO do? Went in 2003 to Iraq to find the so-called weapons of mass destruction. Were there any weapons of mass destruction? No! No! No, it was bullshit, and we all know it was bullshit. Hmm? I mean, everybody in the Middle East knew it was bullshit before the Americans went in. Everybody knew in the Middle East that Saddam Hussein was bullshitting about weapons of mass destruction because he was trying to deter the Iranians from attacking him. And so he concocted this notion that he might have nukes, he might have biologicals, he might have chemicals, just to keep the Iranians at bay. And the United States used this bullshit story, which they knew was bullshit. They knew it was bullshit. They knew that Saddam Hussein was bluffing about having weapons of mass destruction. They knew it from the get-go before they went there. But they used that as the excuse. They used Saddam Hussein's bluff as the excuse to justify the invasion. And they destroyed Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of people killed, perhaps a million. And certainly millions of Iraqis displaced, and the country itself destroyed. I mean, just ruined irreparably. The country is a wreck and will never be what it once was. I mean, it wasn't that much to begin with, but now it's just a shithole. I mean, a real shithole, just rubble and nothing. It's just done. And it's a tragedy for the Iraqi people. Okay, I'm not saying this to belittle the Iraqi people. I'm just saying it to highlight the suffering that the Americans inflicted. They destroyed the whole fucking country for a lie. And the Russians noticed this. And so the Russians in the early 2000s, they started realizing, these Americans, they're fucking nuts. And they started arming themselves to the teeth. That's what they started doing. And the first thing they started doing was scraping off all of these foreign financiers and all this foreign oligarchs from Russia and getting their shit in order insofar as their defense is concerned. And it took them a few years, over a decade, as a matter of fact. But the Russian armed forces today, arguably, and this performance in Ukraine might actually be proof positive, arguably, the Russian military is the best in the world right now, superior to the Americans, certainly more capable. Man for man, more capable than the Americans. And I'll explain it in just a moment in this live stream. But you got to understand what's going on here. See, the Russians didn't decide out of fucking nowhere that they're going to invade Ukraine. NATO was the aggressor in Serbia, in Bosnia. NATO was the aggressor in Iraq. NATO was the aggressor in Libya that destroyed Libya, which was whatever you might have thought of Gaddafi. I mean, he was a funder of terrorism, and he was a crazy bastard. Yeah, remember his 40 virgin bodyguard thing? What the fuck was that? Oh, fucking nuts, man. That's what happens when you got too much money and too much free time. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, Gaddafi, nutty as he was, at least he had a functioning country. They destroyed it. NATO destroyed it. What was Hillary Clinton's famous line? We came, we saw, he died. Jesus Christ, what bloodthirsty bitch that cunt is, huh? I mean, really. Anyway, they destroyed Yugoslavia, they just destroyed Iraq, they destroyed Libya, and the Russians, by this time, they were wise to the game. Okay? And in 2014, there was the famous color revolution in Ukraine. The color revolution was a coup d'etat. It was a coup d'etat, and don't give me bullshit that it wasn't. Yanukovych was a president at that time, and he was very buddy buddies with the Russians, right? And he was a corrupt fat fuck, no question. Okay, but he was the democratically elected president of Ukraine, and he was carrying out the policies that the people of Ukraine wanted. You know, I mean that's a fact. And what happened? Why did they decide to pull a color revolution and get rid of him, of depose him, of, have a coup d'etat to get rid of him? Well, because see, he was all set to sign the letter of agreement with the EU, but then a lot of ethnic Russians and Eastern Ukrainians were opposed to it for various reasons, and the Russians were opposed to it. And Yanukovych started sort of like dithering on the issue, and the Europeans got pissed. I'm simplifying grossly the story, but for purposes of this conversation, it's good enough. The Europeans got pissed. The Americans got pissed because they wanted to get closer to Russia. They wanted to expand NATO, and this was one of the first steps in that direction. And well, they got rid of Yanukovych in a coup d'etat. Yeah, Yanukovych did himself no service, no favors, because he was a dithering kind of guy. I mean, he was kind of like he was an old fat fuck who didn't have a lot of balls. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he could get it up with some Viagra, but not on his own. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, the guy, well, he got deposed. He flew off. He actually flew off to Russia, and he's still there, as far as I know. And Poroshenko came in. And what happened after that? Well, it was a color revolution, and it was engineered by a woman named Victoria Nuland. Remember that name, Victoria Nuland. She's the Wicked Witch of the West, okay? And she's an evil cunt, okay? I mean, really, she's like a Hillary Clinton type woman, Loud, brassy, arrogant, just really just a piece of shit. And one of those women who enjoys a certain level of power and thinks that she earned it. She's just a real piece of shit. You read about her, you find out more about her, and you realize how despicable she really is. But anyway, I'll get to that. I'll get to her in a minute. She was part of the crew that engineered the coup d'etat in 2014. And the coup caught the Russians totally flat-footed. Wait, how many people do I have watching? 3,300. Holy shit, wait. You're going to have to see my fat fucking face real close up because I can't see this. I got 1,000 thumbs up. I got 3,300 people watching. Dude, you poor bastards. Don't you have anything better to do on a Sunday? Come on, you cocksuckers. Go out there. It's a sunny day. You don't have to listen to me ranting and raving. But anyway, since you're all a bunch of losers like me, here we go. Anyway, the point. Right, the color revolution of 2014. See, the Russians at that time, they were getting their shit together insofar as the money situation and the weapons situation, but they weren't really, on top of the ball, as it were. And so they hit on a really elegant solution. See, when the color revolution happened, the Russians were absolutely terrified that they would lose Crimea and that they would lose the jewel of Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula. When you look at a map of Ukraine, the Crimean Peninsula is very south. It sticks into the Black Sea. And the jewel of Crimean Peninsula is, of course, Sevastopol, which is a city, but also a very important naval base. And the Russians did not want to lose it at any cost, okay? And so they were willing to pay any price to hold on to it. And so Putin, when this whole color revolution shit happened and the confusion of it, he realized Ukraine is lost, but we can't lose Crimea. And he went out and grabbed it. Simple as that. See, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine had Crimea. Because Crimea, historically, has been Russian. Even though it was separated from Russia, it's always been Russia. And in fact, the Russian Empire in the 19th century fought a war with the British Empire over the Crimean Peninsula. And it was called, ta-da, the Crimean War. Look it up. And so anyway, the point is, and by the way, the charge of the Light Brigade, I do believe it happened there. But anyway, the point is that Russians, the Russian Empire in the 19th century, Crimea was theirs. The Soviet Union in the 20th century, Crimea was theirs. The Russian Federation, the inheritors of the Soviet Union, well, they considered Crimea theirs, but in 1954, Nikita Khrushchev had assigned Crimea administratively to the Ukrainian SSR, okay, which is the internal division of the Soviet Union. And see, it was an administrative determination. But what happened was the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. That administrative decision led to Ukraine in 1991 breaking away from the Soviet Union and owning Crimea. And Russia found itself in the awkward position of having to pay rent to have its base in Sevastopol. And the thing is, see, what sort of like chapped the ass of the Russians was that, see, on Crimea, 95% of the population there is ethnic Russian. They identify themselves as Russian nationals. They speak Russian. They don't speak Ukrainian. They have no interest in being Ukrainian. Crimea is Russian, whether you like it or not, okay? But anyway, they were stuck in this position after 1991 because the Russian Federation in 1991 and throughout the 90s was way too poor to do anything about it. Now, in 2014, when the Color Revolution happened, all of a sudden Putin realized if we lose Crimea, we lose Sevastopol. If we lose Sevastopol, who's going to get it? NATO. And they didn't want that. And so the Russians went out and grabbed Crimea. They grabbed it. And they didn't actually have to go there because they had the military personnel right there on the base. It's a military base. They had like 60,000 troops on the base before the whole Color Revolution, just as just the way you have 60,000 troops at Fort Bragg, Georgia, or whatever the hell, And so those troops just went out there and took over the island. That's that, okay? And the peninsula, rather, not the island. And they had a plebiscite of the population. The plebiscite was probably bent, but not by a lot, okay? Because the people there felt Russian, and most of them anyway, were like the husbands and wives and kids of the military personnel at Sevastopol, or not all of them, of course, but a huge chunk. I mean, it's like, yeah. So Crimea became part of Russia, but Ukraine never recognized that. But even with Crimea, the Russians realized that they were going to have severe problems with Ukraine and NATO. And so they hit on a very elegant solution. It's extremely elegant and extremely cheap. And it's very important because you see, when you decide to do like some sort of military operation, you have to factor in the costs of it. See? And the Russians, they have limited resources and they're aware of that and they act appropriately. And a lot of times they act as if they have limited resources even when they don't. There's a famous story, and I've told this story many times before. It's a true story that during the space race in the 60s, NASA spent over $1 million developing a pen that could be used in zero gravity. Because, of course, in zero gravity, the ink flows down because of gravity, right? When you're in zero gravity, no gravity, you're in space, and therefore the ink is not going to flow to the tip and be able to write. So they developed a hydraulic pen for over $1 million that would push forward the ink so that you could write, mimicking the effect of gravity. They spent $1 million on this zero gravity pen. And you know what the Russians did when they had the same problem? They used a pencil. Yeah, that's the Russian way. Why spend $1 million? Just use a fucking pencil. I mean, that's an elegant solution. And frankly, it's more clever than developing a zero gravity pen, as far as I'm concerned, because yeah, you have a problem and you make do. The Russians had a problem in 2014. Even though they had Crimea, they didn't want Ukraine joining NATO. How to avoid this fate? How to avoid Ukraine joining NATO? Very simple. See, in the NATO bylaws, in the articles of NATO, no new member can join if they are in conflict, either external conflict or internal conflict. And so the Russians hit on this very nifty solution. The southeastern regions of Ukraine, specifically around the cities of Donetsk and Lugansk, they are predominantly Russian. And there have always been Russian separatists there. And so the Russians, the Russian Federation, the Kremlin, they started feeding these separatists money and weapons, on the sly, of course. And all of a sudden, these gangsters, because they declared themselves the Lugansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic, and they broke away from Ukraine. And the Ukrainians sent their army to restore order, and all of a sudden you have this very low-grade civil war. That's basically what happened. And so the Ukrainians, rather than being able to join NATO, all of a sudden have this problem, in their southeast flank. And they are, trying to put these guys down, but they can't because the Russians are feeding them money and guns, and also training and discipline and the whole shebang, the whole spectrum of what you need to keep up an insurgency at low cost. And it was very, very cheap for the Russians. I mean, it was their pencil solution to the problem. See, instead of spending millions of dollars, instead of invading Ukraine, no. What they did was that they just fed money to these separatists, and the separatists did the job for them. All of a sudden, Ukraine becomes radioactive to NATO because of the rules, because NATO all of a sudden realizes if Ukraine joins, then NATO as a whole has to go and deal with this problem one way or the other. It gets sucked into a war, that where does the war end? Who knows? And fuck it, right? That's what NATO says. And Ukraine is desperate to put down this whole thing. And of course, the Russians are very adamant about keeping it rolling, and they keep it rolling. Now, I'm going to skip the diplomatic efforts and 2015 and the Minsk agreements and all that because it's long and tedious, and it's not particularly relevant to the story I want to tell. The story I want to get to is basically the Minsk agreement, just to polish that off because it plays a peripheral role. In 2015, Angela Merkel, for various reasons, and François Hollande, the then president of France, they wrangled the representatives of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics and rounded them up in Minsk and with the Ukrainian government, and they decided on a path to settling the problem. And it depended on Ukraine negotiating directly with these people's republics, with these breakaway republics, as they became called. And I'll call them that for the rest of this because, And so what happened was that, Ukraine was not happy about this, but for reasons that were important at the time that now are trivial, they agreed to it, and that's that. And so there's the Minsk agreements that were ratified by the United Nations Security Council, by the way. This agreement was ratified. It wasn't like, just some random bullshit. No, it was like a real deal, okay? And this was the pathway to peace in the region. And so what happens is that, the Ukrainians never implement the Minsk agreements. They never carry out their part of the deal. And their part of the deal is that they have to negotiate directly with the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic. And they never get around to doing that. And they always postpone, and they don't want to because they don't want to recognize them. Because if they recognize them, if they recognize them and start to negotiate directly with them, then they give these breakaway republics legitimacy. And Ukraine doesn't want that. Of course not, because they consider them not even insurrectionists, but just petty criminals who have to be put down. I mean, that's how they treat them on a legal sense, right? So anyway, this is ongoing from 2015. The Russians, of course, they insist on some sort of agreement, but they really don't care because they want to keep Ukraine out of NATO. And the way to do it is they keep on fomenting trouble. And so they talk, both sides out of their out of both sides of their mouths. The Russians, they say, yes, you have to implement the Minsk agreements, Ukraine. And on the other hand, the Russians are the ones feeding money to these breakaway republics. And the Ukrainians aren't stupid. They know this. Everybody knows it. Okay. I mean, shit, a fucker like me, who's an ignorant buffoon, knows this shit, right? So anyway, this is the state of play for 2015 through 2021. Okay. Now, here comes the interesting bit. In October of 2021, a Jake Sullivan starts telling the Financial Times off the record that the Russians are amassing troops at the border of Ukraine, and he gives a location. Well, the location he gave rather was near, I think it was near Kursk in Russia, and see, it was just the regular military base. And in fact, the military base was just closer to Belarus than to Ukraine. Oh yeah, and I forgot the almost color revolution of 2020 in Ukraine. Let me take you back to 2020. Excuse me, I gotta get some water here. Over here I have a open bottle, and yeah, when you say open bottle, that sounds nasty now, doesn't it? You think, oh man, he's gonna be drunk by the end of this shit. No, it's only water. Yeah, I went to a store and bought this. Yeah, I use the word for water in Russian. Yeah, I don't know that many words in Russian, but I know the word for water. It's a vodka. A vodka. Yeah, and give me that. And yeah, it's pretty good. Bad joke. Okay. Dad joke. I know. Fuck off. Anyway, the point in 2020, they started fomenting a color revolution in Belarus with the same purpose of bringing NATO closer to Russia. Because NATO has become let's step back. Why does NATO hate Russia so much? Why does NATO want to get so close to Russia? See, this is a key question. Well, because you see, there is a segment. There are several segments in the neoliberal Western democratic establishment that both hates Russia and covets Russia. See, how can I put this delicately? There is a significant number of people of a certain ethnic group that hate Russia with a passion for historical reasons, ancient historical reasons. And even though these people now live in the United States, are American citizens, and they dress like American citizens in powerful positions in the establishment, they hate Russia with a passion. They hate it. From way back when, from persecutions of the times of the czars, but not even the czars of the 19th century, but I'm talking like 14th century shit. I mean, it's an ancient ethnic hatred that goes back centuries, almost a millennia, okay? If you're interested in reading about it, you should check out Alexander Solzhenitsyn's very famous book, 200 Years Together. Yes, it's one of those prohibited books that has never been translated into English, although there are unofficial translations floating around on the internet. It's pretty easy to find if you know where to look. You just Google this shit. Google 200 Years Together PDF, and you'll find plenty of different versions of it. Anyway, the point is this ethnic group hates Russia with a passion and wants to see it destroyed. Okay? Now, there's another section of the American European establishment that wants to see Ukraine be exploited like it was back in the 90s, and covets rather, Russia's natural resources, because Russia is a huge country and has colossal natural resources of all sorts. And these financiers and these capitalists want those natural resources. And then there's a third component where there is the national security sector that wants, number one, money for weapon systems to fight Russia, and number two, wants to see Russia destroyed for ego reasons. Okay? I mean, in the West, the Russians have a lot of enemies, and you say that the Russians are paranoid. No, 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 no. I mean, like the saying goes, it's not paranoid if they're after you. Okay? Yeah, they're after them. They hate the Russians. At least these three groups and others too, for various reasons. I mean, reasons that have little to do with Russia, if you think about it, and have everything to do with their own private psychoses or their own greed or evil. Call it what you will. Anyway, the point. See, they want to get as close to Russia as possible. They want to break up Russia. They don't want a unified Russia. They want to break it up. Okay. And they want to exploit it and just suck it dry. I mean, like a vampire squid right to the face. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, the Russians, they're wise to this situation. Of course, they don't want it. They don't want their own destruction, right? And Russia's got plenty of problems of its own, demographic problems, problems with abortion that's limiting its demographic growth, all kinds of shit like that. But let's leave that aside for now. I mean, they're aware of this. Everybody's aware of it. But the Russians, the demographic problem is serious, but they've got this imminent problem of this cabal in the West that really wants them dead and destroyed and destitute and just broken apart. And so what they decide to do is they're going to arm themselves to the teeth, and they're going to make a lot of money and build up a war chest of a lot of fucking money. And they do. Now, in 2020, the West tried to engineer another color revolution, this time in Belarus. They wanted to get rid of Lukashenko, who's been the president slash dictator of Belarus since 1994 or 1991, actually. And it's way back. The guy was actually a member of the Politburo of the Soviet Union back in the day. Yeah, he goes way back. Anyway, this guy, he's corrupt, nepotistic. I mean, all kinds of nastiness, right? And this fucker has played both sides off the middle, the Europeans and the Russians off against each other for his own benefit. Good on him, I mean, he's caught between the Europeans and the Russians, and so why the fuck not, right? But the thing is, see, the Europeans and the Americans and NATO want to get rid of him with this color revolution, and so he throws his lot in with Uncle Vlad, Uncle Vovia. Vovia, I think, or Vlad. I don't know how the fuck, the shortened name of Vladimir is, but anyway, you get the point. Lukashenko gets to be awfully close to Putin because Putin saves his bacon. Putin is the one who gives him the heads up about the color revolution. Putin, or members of the Putin government, wrap up an attempted coup against Lukashenko. I mean, they really saved his ass. And Lukashenko knows it. He's smart enough to realize what's what. And he realizes that the Europeans want his head. And so he sides with the Russians. The Europeans, the Westerners, in their impatience, instead of keeping on playing with Lukashenko and keeping him going until a replacement came around that was really their guy, and with that new guy, they could push Lukashenko aside. No, they figured that they'd just get rid of Lukashenko right off the bat, and then they'd figure out who they'd replace him with. And see, that was the mistake that the West made. And so Lukashenko, he threw in his lot with Putin. Putin protected him, and in exchange, Putin got him to sign a whole bunch of agreements for all intents and purposes dissolving the border between Belarus and Russia. I mean, technically it still exists. Technically they're two separate countries. But everything that Belarus does, it does at the direction of Putin and the Kremlin. I mean, the Kremlin owns Lukashenko's ass. They own Belarus. It's an ugly reality, but that's the truth, okay? And frankly, from Lukashenko's point of view, there was nothing to be done. This was it. Okay, so we're up to 2020. And, there have been all kinds of problems with, the West is pissed over the failed color revolution in Belarus, right? Okay, so we hit late October 2021. Now, the Biden administration is in all kinds of trouble. COVID, the vaccines, inflation, Afghanistan, the humiliation of that evacuation, and the whole bit. The whole fucking thing, it's going south. The Biden administration is in trouble. So Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, and a guy who's very close to Hillary Clinton, who loves herself some color revolutions, she starts talking about how there's a military buildup of the Russians. Now, the Russians just have their soldiers, and just their regular bases, right? So what the fuck they are talking about, right? And the Russians, of course, know that they have no intention of invading Ukraine. Why the fuck is this shit going on? What's going on here? And, well, retrospectively, it's clear what was going on. See, Jake Sullivan must have gotten wind that the Durham investigation was going after him, was targeting him. And that came out a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact. But back in October, he must have gotten wind of it. Okay. And so Jake Sullivan clearly, to distract, started floating this idiotic story to focus everybody's attention on this shit. And other groups in the Biden administration and the Democratic Party started getting on this story because it distracted from all the domestic problems going on in the United States. That's essentially what was going on. And now here comes the part that I'm speculating. Okay? Now you take what I'm going to say with as big a grain of salt as you want. But this is speculation, but this is, I think, more or less what happened. The Russians, they saw this. Now, they knew that they had no intention of invading Ukraine in October of 2021, okay? But they must have figured, what are these fucking Americans up to? Let's play along. You got to remember, see, Vladimir Putin, the man Vladimir Putin, right? He is not a chess player because the Russians love their chess. I mean, they love it, and they learn it when they're little kids. And it's not just Russia, but also Ukraine and Belarus. I mean, all the ethnic Russian people, for some reason, they fucking love it. My father-in-law is teaching my kids who are little how to play chess, and they're into it. It's a weird little habit, so it doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly harmless. But everybody thinks that, Russians are great chess masters, and they are. But see, Putin is not into chess. He's into judo. I mean, he said repeatedly that for him, judo was a lifesaver. He was a little bit of a juvenile delinquent until he discovered judo when he was like 13 or 14, and he got into it in a big way. The way a 14-year-old will get into anything in a big way. And he pursued judo very, very diligently, and he got to be pretty good at it. And what's the whole principle of judo? It's two things. Number one, using your enemy's force against him. And the other is decisiveness. Now, these are two very, very important qualities. Using your enemy's force against him and decisiveness. Okay? Now, I once saw something really charming, I thought. It was a video of Vladimir Putin in a judo outfit. And this scrawny little kid, he must have been like maybe, I'd say maybe 11 or 12 years old, but before, hitting puberty, still a boy, right? Not quite a young man. And this boy is also dressed up in his little judo outfit, and he's noticeably shorter and smaller and lighter, like half as wide as Vladimir Putin, and Putin is not a thick man. He's not, he's not fat, and quite a bit shorter, and this boy grabs Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, and flips him. It's kind of adorable. And you see, I thought it was very funny because Vladimir Putin's face is completely impassive during the whole operation, where this small boy takes him and executes very perfectly the judo move of flipping your opponent over. And Vladimir Putin being somebody who's done this for years, he knows exactly what's happening. It wasn't like a humiliation of it. It was just practice, right? And what's interesting is that, see, that boy was carrying out something key in judo, which is decisiveness, see? Because, you see, the boy was, a slim young man, a slim boy. He must have been maybe a third of the weight of the adult Vladimir Putin. And see, if the boy had hesitated in the middle of the move, Vladimir Putin, just because by virtue of his weight, no intention whatsoever, would have crushed him. If the boy had flipped him and and right in the middle had kind of hesitated, the body of Vladimir Putin would have been heavy enough to just, fall on top of the poor boy, potentially hurt him. And that's the point of judo. In judo, they teach you, I took a couple of classes when I was a boy, that what you have to do is be decisive. You grab the guy and you flip him, okay? Once you decide that what you're going to do it. And do it smoothly, efficiently, quickly, decisively. Excuse me. Oopa. Sorry about that. Hang on. And by the way, do you guys hear me properly? Hit me with a +1 if you guys can hear me properly. Yeah, no choking. COVID, I don't know. How many people are watching? 4,500. Dude, that's pretty good. +1, you guys hear me properly? Okay, good. Yeah, so anyway, like I was saying, judo teaches you to use your enemy's force against him and teaches you to be decisive. Okay? Okay. So, in November 2021, there's all this talk that of a Russian military buildup. My suspicion is that the Russians had no intention and no interest in any kind of military buildup, but they went along with it to see, like, where's this shit going? And what they discovered all of a sudden is that everybody started getting hysterical about this so-called military buildup, even though there really wasn't any evidence for it in November of 2021 at any rate, not real evidence. I mean, it's like saying that the Americans are planning to invade Mexico because they have a whole bunch of troops amassing at Fort Bragg, Georgia. And you'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's a regular base. And besides, it's really fucking far away from Mexico. No, 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 no. The soldiers at Fort Bragg are going to invade Mexico. And you're like, okay, let's see where this shit goes. I mean, I suspect that that was the mentality of the Russians. And what happened was that all of a sudden, they discovered that the Europeans and the Americans had different priorities. See? The Americans were all hell-bent for leather on like trying to split the Russians from the Europeans. And the Europeans all of a sudden found out that they needed Russia's natural gas because their own energy policy had been so short-sighted that they had an energy deficit that could only be plugged by Russian natural gas. And so what happened was that the Kremlin, Putin and the whole group, the whole leadership class of Russia, they realized that they could diplomatically split the Europeans from the Americans. And they started acting in that direction of creating the conditions whereby the Europeans and the Americans would split because they had different interests. And they kind of succeeded, okay? But the hysteria kept on going. And anyway, in December of 2021, the Russians decided to use this diplomatic weakness to see if they could get some concessions. And the number one concession that they wanted was a halt to NATO expansion, number one. That's always been a priority for them. Number two, the indivisibility of security, which is a concept whereby no country's security should be arrived at by creating insecurity for another. Okay? That European security had to be integrated, not like individualized, because that would just lead to a constant battle, an arms race, if you will. So it had to be an indivisibility of security. And the third thing that they wanted was a rollback of NATO to, I think it was 1997 borders. It might have been something like that. It doesn't matter. And the point is, see, the Russians floated these ideas, thinking, this is the best chance we'll ever get to see if we get what we want. And the Americans and NATO didn't just throw away these, NATO did. NATO delivered a response that was juvenile and ideological and fucking insane if you think about it, and fucking sophomoric. I mean, you got to read that fucking thing. But anyway, that's not important. The important thing is that, see, the Americans kind of like, sort of like, oh, well, maybe, and they kept like kind of like dangling in front of the Russians the possibility of a diplomatic solution, right? And the Russians kind of like went along with this to see if they'd get it. And then all of a sudden they realized, we're never going to get anything from these guys. Because these guys, the Americans, you can't trust them. And that's the bottom line. The Russians realized in their bones that they could never trust the Americans. And any agreement that they arrived at with the Americans would break it. Which is accurate, okay? I mean, shit, Donald Trump, who unilaterally, and for no fucking reason whatsoever, got out of the intermediate range ballistic missile treaty that was negotiated during the time of Ronald Reagan and was in fact a linchpin of the collective security of Europe. I mean, and Donald Trump, fucking idiot to have done that. He just undermined European security for no fucking reason. He just wanted to we can negotiate a better deal, look at my orange hair, duh, fuck you. Anyway, God, I fucking hate that guy because he's a fucking moron. Okay? Yeah, he's a fucking idiot. And he's weak. That's the thing I despise. He's weak. I could accept if he's stupid, but he's weak. I can't. Yeah, I mean, you can work with a person who's stupid. You can't work with somebody who's weak. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, Putin realized, man, these fucking Americans. There's no way to get anything done with these fuckers. And what happened was that the Europeans and the Americans kept egging on Ukraine, and Ukraine under Zelensky. Zelensky is a regime. They're ugly people. Zelensky has no problem repressing any criticism of his. He has shut down TV channels and persecuted journalists who are critical of him. He's persecuted political opponents, used the powers of the state to go after them. I mean, the guy is not the nicest guy in the world. He's not a white hat, okay? He's an ugly character. And so, anyway, Ukraine kept on poking the bear and provoking the Russians, thinking that they had Europe and the Americans at their back. And then what happened finally was that, see, they kept on provoking the Russians. And the Russians finally said, fuck it. They keep saying that we're going to invade. Let's fucking invade already. I think that that was basically it. And I think also, too, and it's actually been proven. This part, I'm gonna say, originally was my speculation, but it has proven to be true. And my speculation, which I arrived at the very start of this war and was confirmed a couple of days ago, was that when there was the Munich summit with all the leaders, talking about all kinds of diplomatic bullshit, and Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, started floating the idea that Ukraine should reacquire nuclear weapons and nuclear missiles to protect itself, and none of the other leaders of the Western democracies there said a peep, said how fucking insane that idea was. Because who are the Ukrainians going to use those nuclear weapons against? The Russians. They're the only ones, right? What, they're going to shoot them at the fucking Hungarians or the Moldovans or some shit like that? Come on. And so all of a sudden, the Russians start hearing this shit, and they're realizing, these fuckers are crazy. They're fucking fools. And if we don't take the driver's seat insofar as Ukraine, we're going to wake up one morning with these fucking crazy-ass Ukrainians with nuclear weapons, either their own or NATO nuclear weapons. Fuck that. That's why they invaded. That's the story, okay? They realized that they could not reach any kind of diplomatic agreement with the West, and that Ukraine, goaded by the West, led up the garden path by the West, was going to provoke Russia and potentially, now, I mean, in March or rather February of 2022, the Ukrainian army started lobbing shells at the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic, and some of those shells started landing in Russia. And the Russians started realizing, these fuckers might start lobbing shells, but with not shells, but with nuclear warheads on them. What the fuck? That's what they realized. Fuck it. We got to invade these fuckers and take them over and get rid of this government. Okay? And that leads up to my other video that's already on, whereby I explain the strategy of the Russians. The Russians don't mean to destroy Ukraine. On the contrary, they want it intact, and they want the Ukrainian army intact. They just want to get rid of the Zelensky government. And right now, as we're speaking, representatives of the Zelensky government are in Belarus negotiating with Russian representatives for a ceasefire. And everything is on the table. And we're not even 4 days into this invasion. It started Friday morning, Saturday morning, Sunday morning. And it's not yet Monday morning. So it's barely 3.5 days into this war. And the Ukrainians are suing for peace. They're trying to pretend that they're not. And the Ukrainians are very, very good at the information warfare game. But see, the Russians are good at the warfare game. Okay? Not so good at information warfare game, but very good at the just plain old warfare game. And at the end of the day, only one of those kinds of warfare matters. I'll give you three guesses, but you're only going to need one. You know what I'm saying? So the Russians are winning this war. And by the way, I have to say this, and I'm adamant about this. Why is it that every fucking talking head on Twitter and whatever the fuck thinks that the Russians are losing? I mean, it's so fucking unrealistic and stupid. The war has been going on. As I'm speaking to you now, it's about 11 p.m. local time or something like that. So it's been going on for roughly 90 hours. Mm. And in 90 hours, the Russians have conquered more territory than the Americans did in the same amount of time in the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And the difference, of course, is that in Iraq, the Americans spent like a month or so leveling the whole fucking country with 24/7 airstrikes all over the fucking place, destroying every bit of infrastructure in that country. And only then did they roll in. And they still have captured then in 2003 less territory than the Russians have captured today. In the same amount of time, of course. See, the Russian offensive, when you look at it from a military history perspective, is one of the most brilliant in history. Certainly the fastest and most effective mechanized invasion in history. I mean, it blows away the German blitzkrieg. We always talk about the German blitzkrieg as if it's the bee's knees of mechanized warfare. And what happens is that, see, the military imagination focuses on the Netherlands and Belgium, of how the Germans swept through the Netherlands and Belgium into France. Because in our imaginations, the Netherlands and Belgium are very, very big. But see, in actual geographic terms, they're very small. See? And that's why the German offensive, the Blitzkrieg, across Northern Europe, mentally, psychologically seems like a huge deal. But when you're actually there on the ground, it's nothing. I mean, I got my motorcycle. I got a motorcycle in Netherlands when I was living there, and I rode all over the fucking country. I mean, the greatest distance I covered was from Amsterdam to Maastricht. It took me 2.5 hours at a leisurely pace on the freeway. Okay, it's not that fucking big, and so of course that blitzkrieg seems fast, but when you actually measure the territory conquered and the amount and the distance, it's nothing compared to what the Russians are doing today. Okay, and the Russian strategy is very obvious. It's to probe the cities, and whenever they meet resistance, to pull back and encircle. That's what they're doing. They're encircling the cities. They've encircled Kharkov, the second largest city of Ukraine. They are in the process of encircling Kiev. They're winning this war. No matter how you measure it, they are winning it, okay? And they are doing it, and they are avoiding big battles. It's just small arms skirmishes, and some light shelling. And you see all these rockets going, and you think, oh my God, it's light shelling. It's not that big of a deal, okay? In modern combat, it's not that big of a deal. And anyway, what's really been hit hard have been military targets, okay? The cities are pretty much untouched. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that the Russians are winning. And the people in the West talking about this war, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They don't seem to understand the mechanics of a military invasion, of tanks sweeping across the country. They think that this is like Formula One racing, that they can sweep across a country as big as Ukraine in an afternoon. Fucker, I rode my motorcycle, my BMW R1200 GSA Adventure, right? I rode that fucking thing from the border of Poland with Ukraine, Lviv, Kamenetsky, Kiev, Poltava, Kharkov. It took me 4 fucking days to make that crossing, okay? The distance from one end of Ukraine to the other, east to west, is greater than the distance from Ukraine's western border with Poland to Paris. It's greater than that, okay? The country is fucking huge. And these fuckers are rolling it up. Simple as that. And they're going to roll up the whole fucking thing. the Russians are going to roll up the whole fucking thing on these negotiations that are going on, which, by the way, the fact that the Ukrainians wanted, negotiations after less than 4 days, and they're losing. They know it. They know that they're losing. The fact that they are forcibly conscripting men between the ages of 18 and 60, which they are, that proves that they're losing, because you only resort to that kind of tactic, after the fourth, fifth month of grinding, fighting, of just grinding, meat grinding, kind of like war of attrition kind of shit. The fact that they're doing it now, they're losing. They're losing badly. But in terms of propaganda, they're winning. And so what happens is the people on Twitter, the people on Facebook, the people all over fucking social media, these fucking people, they have a completely warped sense of what the fuck is going on. I mean, I'm here right now in this fucking country. I'm in the middle of the fucking invasion, man. I'm in fucking downtown Kiev. And I'm telling you, the Russians are winning. And they're winning spectacularly. And the worst part, to add insult to injury, is that the Russians are not using their varsity team to make this win. Okay? No, because a lot of people have been noticing that, the prisoners of war that get captured, and it's inevitable. Both sides lose prisoners of war and shit like that. It's part of mechanized warfare. Okay, it doesn't mean that one side is winning or losing. It just means that, some soldiers in a army of who knows how many hundreds of thousands of men got, caught by the enemy. It doesn't mean shit. But they've noticed that a lot of these prisoners of war, Russian prisoners of war, are pretty green. Young guys, 19-year-olds, right? And very green, little experience. And the weapons that they're using, the tanks. Yeah, sure, there are a few that are kind of new, but most of them are like things from the 2000s and some of them from the 1990s. And everybody's saying, what the fuck does that mean? And well, it's pretty fucking obvious if you think about it. The Russians, what do they do with this first wave? They use their old gear and their second-tier soldiers. Not exactly as cannon fodder, but they're keeping their best people in reserve. Because they do have better soldiers and better equipment. And this is known. This is not like they say that, like the girlfriend in Canada. No, it's the real deal. These guys have state-of-the-art tanks, state-of-the-art self-propelled weapons and stuff like that, and very badass motherfucking soldiers. Like the fuckers that they sent to Kazakhstan a couple of months ago. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but the point. See, the Russians have primo soldiers. They have great soldiers, very well equipped, okay? But the people that they send the first wave, not so great, not so well equipped. Why? Well, because they wanted to probe to see what kind of defenses they'd get from the Ukrainians. And also because, you see, the Ukrainians defending their territory, they're going to use their best people to defend it. And so you use your second-tier people to wear down the best defenses, so that later your best soldiers are up against a worn-down defense, and you can wipe them out. See? That's the strategy. Also, I suspect another strategy, when you have second-tier soldiers, they go in and they do the heavy lifting of the first wave and the probing attacks and whatnot. And then later, when you have conquered the whole fucking country and you need an occupying army, you use your more disciplined, more experienced soldiers. Because these more experienced and disciplined soldiers, they're not going to abuse the populace. It's inevitable that a conquering army will abuse the civilians. It happens in every war. If you don't know it, look up the father of Emmett Till. The father of Emmett Till was a soldier in the American Army in World War II. And after the end of the war, he was part of the occupying force in Italy. And he was arrested, tried, court-martialed, and convicted and executed for raping a bunch of Italian women. Yeah, look it up. I'm not making this shit up, man. It happens in every fucking war. The military, and it's inevitable, guys with guns and a lot of cum, they just go out there and do all kinds of abuses. It happens and it's ugly and that's life. Anyway, the point, with more disciplined soldiers, with the top tier soldiers, Those guys, they have the discipline to not abuse the citizenry, which is, of course, what the Russians want, because they want a political solution to this problem. They don't want to conquer Ukraine. They don't want to destroy Ukraine. They just want Ukraine with a different leadership. They want it with a leadership like what they have with Lukashenko. Lukashenko is their buddy-buddy. He does whatever they want. And most important of all, he doesn't allow NATO to set up shop in fucking Belarus. What the Russians want is for Ukraine to not allow fucking NATO to set up shop. Simple as. Now, the thing is, see, the Russians have offered this, they've agreed to this negotiation. They are talking with the Ukrainians right now. Whatever agreement comes out of it, well, I doubt if any agreement will come out of it. And the Russians will never actually agree to it. They might claim that they'll agree to it, but they're not going to, because they don't trust Zelensky. They want to get rid of him, okay? And I'll say this. I don't know how this is going to sound, but I'm talking not as a moral judgment or anything of the sort. I'm just saying what I think will happen. I think that the Russians will figure out a way to assassinate Zelensky in some way that doesn't splash a lot of shit their way, because they can't afford to have Zelensky live and fly off and have a government in exile of Ukraine. They can't afford that. They're not going to allow that to happen. And so they'll promise Zelensky, safe passage. They'll promise him all kinds of bullshit. And the first opportunity they have, the Russians will kill him or neutralize him somehow in a way that is permanent. The only thing that's permanent is death, of course, okay? I don't think that they're going to grab him and throw him in a prison, because then it would create a martyr figure like Nelson Mandela, see? And the Russians are smart. They know their history. They love their history, which is actually one of the great qualities of Russians, as far as I'm concerned. Caring about history, knowing your history, and learning from it. You can become a very powerful man if you pay attention to history and learn from it. And the Russians most certainly have paid attention to history. They pay attention. They're smart motherfuckers. And so because they know their history, they know the story of Nelson Mandela, they know the story of people who have formed governments in exile, like what happened with Ayatollah Khomeini. The Ayatollah Khomeini was an exile in Paris, and he essentially created a parallel government in exile in Paris. And when the Shah finally fell, they just shipped him in and they were ready to go, and they took over the whole fucking thing. Yeah, the Islamic Revolution, baby. That's what happened in 79, in January of 79. The Russians know that. They're smart. They're not going to let it happen again. Not to them at any rate. So as far as Zelensky is concerned, and Zelensky said that he's the #1 target for the Russians, and he's right. The Russians want him dead. And they'll agree to any conditions and this and that, and then they'll figure out a way to get rid of him, but permanently get rid of him. And I don't mean this in a nasty way. I'm just talking about purely as war gaming strategy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Anyway, they're going to install somebody, and look, they are going to conquer the whole fucking country. That's inevitable. Now, I said that they are holding back their best soldiers with the best equipment. They're holding them back for the occupation. Yes, that's one of the reasons. The other reason, they're holding back their best people in case the Americans and the Europeans do something stupid, like try to invade Ukraine from Poland. Okay? This is a distinct possibility right now, because the Westerners are getting hysterical over this Ukrainian situation. And so the issue, I think, could become that the Russians are seeing this hysteria, and it's scaring them. Well, that's why they move these nuclear weapons, to scare off the Americans in turn. But I don't think it's having the effect that the Russians intended. They thought that they'd show off their nuclear weapon and say, and the West would sort of like calm down and be like rational, say, whoa, Nelly, let's chill the fuck out. But no, the Europeans, it seems clear, is that they're going even more insane. And this is a bad thing for everybody. Now, why am I saying that the Europeans are going insane? And the Americans too, but to a lesser extent, but the Europeans most definitely. Well, the Europeans just now, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, pledged 100 billion euros over the next 2 years to beef up Germany's military. And that's a whole lot of fucking money in 2 years. I mean, that's a panic move. And the other thing too is that they're all hell-bent for leather on pulling Russia out of SWIFT. But they don't seem to realize that if they pull Russia out of SWIFT, Russia can just say, okay, fuck you. I'm not going to sell you natural gas. I'm not going to sell you food. I'm not going to sell you petroleum. And Europe is fucked because you see, they import roughly half of all of those commodities from Russia or from Ukraine. And Russia now controls Ukraine. You see? And so the Europeans, in their panic, are doing things that are self-destructive to them. And they don't seem to realize it. They're so panicked and so wigged out. And I think that here we're having a major, major problem because it's the Europeans and the Americans that are no longer thinking rationally. And all of this commentary that you're seeing online about how the Russians are losing this war, that they're not advancing quickly enough, and how come the Russians are not destroying all the infrastructure like we do, which is just stupid because of the reasons I mentioned, that the Americans like to destroy shit, but the Russians don't want to destroy shit. On the contrary, they want to capture it intact and in working order. That's why I'm able to talk to you on this fucking live stream. Because if the Russians wanted to destroy the infrastructure, I wouldn't be talking to you. And in fact, there wouldn't be any electricity where I am now. And in fact, there wouldn't be any running water, nice hot water, running water, no heating either. No fucking cell phone. No, it would be fucking dark if they wanted it. But they don't want it. That's why it's still on after nearly 4 days of combat. The Russians want to capture Ukraine intact in one piece, not break it, not like the Americans. The American way of war is to destroy. The Russian way of war is to capture and control, but never break. Which makes complete sense, man. I mean, you say that the Russians acted immorally by invading Ukraine. Okay, fine. Let me ask you something. When a thief breaks into a jewelry store, yeah, he smashes the cases where the jewels are, but does he take that crowbar and start smashing the actual jewels? No, he doesn't, because that's the value of the fucking thing now, isn't it, right? But that's what the Americans do. The Russians aren't doing that. The Russians broke into the store and they smashed the glass cases, but they're not smashing the jewels. They're stealing them, but they're not smashing them. The Americans smash them, okay? And the Americans now, since they're so used to smashing shit, they're wondering, how come you're not smashing the jewels like we do? You see what I'm saying? Okay? So anyway, the Russians, you got to admire this invasion. It's been amazing. They are taking over the southeast, the northeast, around Kharkov. And this morning I got word that soldiers had penetrated into Kharkov. It's just a matter of time before Kharkov falls. It's surrounded, and so that's game over. It's just a matter of time. And insofar as the south is concerned, from the Crimea, they've captured Kherson, they've captured Zaporozhye. They're well on their way to Dnipro. They're probably maybe 48 hours away, 48 to 72 hours away from Dnipro. And once they hit Dnipro, which is the third largest city of Ukraine, they will have been surrounded. They will have rather surrounded the biggest three cities of Ukraine, and they will fall inevitably. When you surround a city, it's just inevitable. And the mayor of Kiev, the city where I am now, he admitted to the AP, and then he took it back, but he admitted to the AP that Kiev is surrounded. And I know for a fact that 3 of the 4 highways that lead out of Kiev have been interdicted by the Russian army. The only one that's still available is the one heading west. All the other 3, the 2 eastward ones and the one that goes northwest, have been interdicted. I think also there's a couple of southern ones, southern routes that are, well, they're major, but not that major. I think that they're still open. But Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, he said, I think it was a slip of the tongue. He said that Kiev is surrounded. And he said it like maybe, a couple of hours ago. So that's probably right. He took it back in a Facebook post, but, the cat's out of the bag, And so the point is, see, the Russians, how did they attack? Well, they didn't. See, what they do is they go up against some unit, Ukrainian unit. They push up against it, and when they encounter resistance, they pull back and surround. That was their approach. That has been their approach throughout this war. And so, from the Ukrainian perspective, it actually raises their morale because the Ukrainians, they're defending. And then they see these attackers coming their way. And they push forward to fight the attackers. The attackers retreat and move out. And from the perspective of the Ukrainians, it's like, we won. Hey, we won. We drove them off, man. We're great. We're cool. We're tough. But they don't realize what's happening. That the force that they encountered was just probing, and then pulling back to surround. The Russians have been consistently probing to establish the limits, the contact lines around all these cities. That's their strategy. It's very simple. It's a very simple and very effective strategy. At the same time, by pushing hard in the southeast, and at the same time pushing hard in the northeast, they're cutting off a big chunk of the Ukrainian army in it's a maneuver that the Russians call the cauldron, like a witch's cauldron. They cover up the top, okay, and they basically boxing in something like 75 to 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers. They're boxing them in. The only thing that's sort of like left as an appendage is Western Ukraine. Now, Western Ukraine is, first of all, it's filled with ethnic Ukrainians who dislike Russians, and that's part of the problem with Ukraine as a country, because Ukraine has a substantial ethnic Russian minority, a substantial one, I mean, close to 50%, and the ethnic Ukrainian majority, which is marginal. I personally cannot tell the difference between a Ukrainian and a Russian, an ethnic Ukrainian and an ethnic Russian. They look the same to me, But there are differences, and the language is different, and they consider themselves different people, and they don't like each other. Okay, and they can tolerate each other, and lots of them intermarry, of course, but they're not crazy about it. Now they don't want a political future together. This country is it's sort of like a product of colonialism, no different than a lot of Middle Eastern countries or African countries, where you have a lot of different ethnic groups that are shoved together haphazardly because the borders were established by the colonial powers way back when. And so, anyway, the thing about the current invasion, the Russians have left Western Ukraine, and what's very clear to me is that once they have consolidated the eastern and central portions of Ukraine, the Russian army is going to pivot to the west and just drive forward all the way to the Polish border. And they're going to do it slowly and take their sweet time because they're going to be just shoving all of the people that they don't want the other way. They're going to be going westward, pushing forward, and shoving them out through the funnel of Ukraine out into Poland. And all the soldiers and people who don't want to be part of this new Ukraine are going to exit into Poland and the EU, and it'll be the EU's problem. And the Russians will, my thinking, and this I think it seems to me to be reasonable, the Russians will probably split up Ukraine into at least two countries, possibly as many as four, but at least two. There's going to be eastern and southern Ukraine. Odessa. I mean, if you look at a map, Kharkov, to your right-hand side, you're going to see Kharkov, going south, Lugansk, Donetsk, Mariupol, and going on to Kherson and Odessa. That whole curve, it looks vaguely like a fat Nike swoosh, right? That whole curve is going to go and become its own country, and perhaps part of Russia, perhaps a new country called Novorossiya, but it's going to be a separate entity, and ethnically Russian, majority ethnically Russian. Then the central rump of Ukraine around Kiev, and including perhaps Dnipropetrovsk, or maybe Dnipropetrovsk becomes a limit city, depends on factors that aren't important at this point. That would become a separate entity. And the west of Ukraine, that becomes a third country, or it gets dangled in front of Poland and becomes some sort of Polish protectorate, because the Poles, they have their eye on Lviv. Lviv is a historically very important city for the Poles, and they want it back. They've wanted it back since way back after the war. They've been clamoring. They clamored Nikita Khrushchev and Brezhnev over Lviv. They want Lviv back because they consider it their city for historical reasons that aren't really important in this conversation. The point is that they want it back. And it could be that that part gets chopped off, and then you have like a separate, a Hungarian part of Ukraine and a Polish part of Ukraine, and they get shoved off to Hungary and Poland. Who knows? I mean, all sorts of things can happen. And Putin can be in the driver's seat insofar as that, because he can dangle these territories in front of Poland and Hungary, and it would break NATO. Because these countries, Hungary and Poland, they would desperately want those territories. And NATO wouldn't want those countries to have those territories because it would break discipline. And so you'd have all kinds of internal skirmishes, and eventually it would lead to these countries exiting NATO. And all of a sudden, NATO is really, really down on the ropes, right? So, this seems to be the state of play. Let me just check real quick, rather. How many people? Whoa, I got 6,500 of you fuckers listening to me. Dude. Okay, hit me with a +1 if my rantings and ravings make any kind of fucking sense to you fuckers. Hit me with a +1 if you like it, and hit me with a 0 if you think it's awful, that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I'm ranting and raving as usual. What's my name? Where am I? Who are you? What did I do? It's not me. How come there's shit in my diaper? Okay, so I guess you fuckers enjoy this shit. Okay, man, you fuckers are masochists. Okay, hit me with a, if you want me to keep on going, hit me with a more, please. And if you want me to shut up, just say STFU. If you want more, say more, please, in the comments. And if you want me to shut up, just say STFU. Whoa. Okay. Yeah. Now, I want to emphasize that before I go on with this shit, right? I want to emphasize something. See, I'm not making any moral judgments, as you can tell. And I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. I think that the Ukrainian people are a lovely people and a very brave people. And they've shown themselves to be so. I think their government, the Zelensky regime, is despicable. And I'm going to explain now why I think that they're despicable. I really despise them for actions that they've taken over the last couple of days. And I think that once you understand what they have done over the last couple of days, you'll probably agree with my assessment that they are despicable, morally reprehensible. I mean, flat out evil, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm going to explain right now. You see, mechanized warfare, or industrial warfare. Industrial warfare started with the Civil War in the United States. The War of 1861 to 1865 was the first time that the Industrial Revolution was applied to warfare. And you had machine guns, and you had all kinds of industrial weaponry that were used, and the consequences were horrifying. I mean, the Battle of Gettysburg, I've been there. I've been to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, when I was a boy, and I was shocked by the number of headstones, and the sheer loss of life is incomprehensible. And so the Civil War, the American Civil War, was the first industrial war. The second great industrial war was, of course, the First World War, the War of 1914 to 1918. Again, trench warfare, static, endless barrages, I mean, it was just horrifying. Now, you see, in industrial warfare, it turns out that you have to have a highly trained, highly disciplined soldier to be effective, see? Because in industrial warfare, a lot of things are happening at the same time. You have a noise that panics the vast majority of people. The noise of it is just overwhelming, okay? The bangs, the shootings, everything. It just triggers every instinct to flee. You have to overcome a great deal of instinctive behavior to remain where you are in the middle of industrial warfare. Okay? Now, forget about actually using a weapon. Using a weapon, it's a sophisticated piece of equipment. Even the simplest weapon, like an AK-47, which is exceedingly simple weapon, that's the beauty of it. Well, it is complicated to use. You have to be careful. And the thing is, see, using an AK-47 only is really effective not when a man uses it, but when a team uses it, in the sense that each member of the team has his own AK-47 or whatever other weapon, and they are operating as a team, supporting one another, and protecting one another. See, these weapons are exceedingly dangerous. And if you are operating as a team, say a platoon or a squad, well, you can become extraordinarily effective, an extraordinarily effective fighting force. But if you don't have that training, you might know how to operate the weapon, but you can become a danger to yourself and to the people around you. And you are certainly going to be a dead man if you come across any professional soldier with the basic training necessary to operate effectively at the squad level. Okay? Now, suppose like some old fat fucking fart like myself picked up an AK-47 and started wandering around, looking for Ruskies to shoot, right? Okay, so I'm wandering around with my fucking gun, my AK-47. Some Russian squad catches wind of me. They see me, they're going to plug me on the spot. They're going to shoot me right dead, right there and then. No questions asked, of course. See, because when these guys, when they turn their attention, they turn their weapon at you too, and they see you with the gun, they're going to shoot you, of course, right on the spot. And there isn't going to be anything you can do because you're not going to know how to defend yourself. You'll be able to shoot back, but you won't know how to evade the oncoming fire. You're going to be so freaked out by it. I mean, when you hand out weapons like that willy-nilly to civilians, you are essentially creating a hazard for them. Those people who take these weapons, they're the ones who are going to get hurt. They're going to die. And so the Zelensky regime handed out, as far as I understand, like something like 10,000 AK-74s. The AK-74s are just advanced versions of the 47, same fucking thing, basic rifle. And they handed out 10,000 AK-74s and munitions to match. And, they just gave them out. They also, well, I'll get to the conscription in just a second. And so what happens with all these people who've got these guns? They're going to go out and they're going to think that they're brave and they're tough and they can stick up against the Russian, a squad of Russians, of Russian soldiers, of Russian, trained Russian soldiers, even second-tier soldiers. Well, those Russian soldiers are going to cut these civilians down to pieces instantly. I mean, they won't even see it coming. And that's the thing, because they're not going to be operating in a squad where the members of the squad would protect each other because they're going to be looking around. No, one lone guy with no fucking training wandering around with a gun, he's going to have blind spots, basically 2/3, 3/4 of his circumference. He's going to get wasted almost instantly, right? He's not going to know what hit him by the time he's dead. And so what's going to happen? That's going to present a great photo op now, isn't it? Ooh, look, the Russians killed a civilian. And then all of a sudden you realize that that's the whole point of it. That's why they're handing out the weapons, to get civilians to get killed, for the photo op, for the narrative. I mean, think of it. These fuckers are so evil that they are handing out weapons knowing that the people that take these weapons are going to get shot almost instantly and killed, so that they can have images of Russian atrocities against civilians. That's why they are handing out the weapons. That's why they are teaching civilians how to make Molotov cocktails and encouraging them to do this irresponsible behavior. They're going to get killed. And for no reason other than a photo op. And why? Because the Zelensky government, the Zelensky regime, thinks that they can use these photo ops to draw in the Western powers to be on the side of Ukraine and fight the war that Ukraine is losing. And I'm sorry to say this, for those people who are pro-Ukrainian, who are Ukrainian, I have nothing but sympathy for your situation. I live in Ukraine. I'm married to a Ukrainian woman. We have children that are Ukrainian. I love Ukrainian people. They're lovely people. They've always been incredibly kind to me, and I've tried my hardest to be as equally kind and as equally decent to them as they have been to me. And it's always been just a superb. It's a superb country. I mean, I can live anywhere I want to. I'm living here because I want to, because I think Ukraine is fantastic. But that doesn't change the fact that they're losing the war and they're not going to win it. There's no way for them to win it. The only way to win it is to draw in some of the Western powers. And so the Zelensky regime is trying to have what seem to be Russian committed atrocities on camera, on video, on film, on digital film, so they can show the world how evil the Russians are and convince, emotionally blackmail the West into joining into this war. That's what's going on. And it's fucking despicable. The other thing that the Zelensky regime is doing, and part of the reason for the flood of refugees, or not quite the flood of refugees leaving the country, but certainly internal refugees, is that the Zelensky regime is forcibly conscripting people into the Ukrainian army. Men between the ages of 18 and 60 started being forcibly conscripted into the armed forces. Now, I know this for a fact that they stop buses and a policeman will get on and look for any man who looks between 18 and 60, grab him, pull him off the bus, irrespective of whether he's married, irrespective of whether he's a father and responsible for children, irrespective if he's a crippled old man and doesn't have what it takes to carry a weapon or carry a bundle of gear. It doesn't matter. They pull him off and they forcibly stick him into the army. I mean, fucking, not even Keith Woods pointed out that not even Gaddafi did some shit like that. And if he had, everybody would have been outraged at the grotesque violation of human rights, because it is. I know two men, professional men. One's a lawyer, one's a businessman. Both of them reputable guys, great guys. I know them personally. I know their wives. I know their kids. I've gone drinking with them. I've eaten with them. I've done deals with them. I know them. And they fled Kiev. Why? Because they were terrified that they'd get picked up and forcibly conscripted. And these are professional men, okay? Businessmen. One is a businessman and one's a lawyer. And I know them personally. I can tell you their first and last names and fucking addresses, man. I know them. And they told me personally that was why they were fleeing the city. When the first one told me this, I was like, what the fuck, man? But when the second one told me, I was like, shit, this is real. And that's why there are so many people fleeing the major cities, because they are family men who are fleeing the cities with their entire families because they don't want to leave their wives and children alone behind them while they run away. Of course not. They want to have their family near them. And so they have been fleeing the cities to go to any obscure corner of the country. They can't cross out of the country, because if they do, at the border, they'll be picked up by the Zelensky regime's police force and pressed into the armed forces, pressed like gang pressed, like back in the days, in the 19th century and the 18th century, when they would do this to press a crew of sailors. Yeah, the same kind of treatment, man. This is inhumane. And that's why you have so many people inside the country fleeing. Because, of course, the women of these people, that is their wives, their mothers, their sisters, their daughters, they don't want these men to go to the army. Most of these men are incapable and incompetent for combat. And I'm not putting them down in any way. I'm 53. I'm about to turn 54 in like 2 days, right? If I were to be conscripted into the army, I wouldn't last 5 seconds. I mean, like, forget about the training of the shit, I mean, I'm out of shape. I've got a broken ankle that never really healed because I'm old. I can't fucking see. I mean, I need glasses thick as Coke bottles, man. I'm uncoordinated. Dude, I'm a danger if you put a weapon in my hand. I mean, you want me to write a fucking speech or some shit like that? I'm aces, right? You want me to rant and rave on a fucking live stream with you fuckers? I'm aces. Put a gun in my hand? Are you out of your fucking mind? I mean, it's not that I don't want to. I mean, if I were defending my country against some foreign invader, I would volunteer. But anybody sane would look at me and say, nice try, Gonzalo, but you're not up for it. You're not up for picking up a rifle and, shooting it at the enemy. No, you're good at other shit, right? We've all got our purpose in life. But the point I'm trying to make is that the Zelensky regime is doing this. But I think I have to go back. Oh, and the other thing that they're doing, which is really fucking despicable. Oh, man, this is despicable. They are putting heavy weaponry among the civilian population. And this is, lots of people have pointed this out, and all over the fucking country. They are putting howitzers between civilian buildings. Now, a howitzer is a heavy gun, okay? Now, a howitzer, the great thing about it is that you can put it anywhere. It's like basically a big gun on a tripod, right? And it's a gun that's aimed like that. It's ballistic. It goes like up and down and blows up. So all kinds of cool, right? But the thing is, see, the Russians, when they get wind that there's like a fucking howitzer, they want to get rid of it. They want to destroy it. Of course they do, okay? Because they don't want to get hit by the fucking howitzer, now do they? So they try to hit it. They figure out more or less where the howitzer is, and they start aiming their own weapons, their own howitzers perhaps, and try to blow it up. And of course, see, they do a few tries, and they're going to miss. It's inevitable, right? And who are they going to hit? They're going to hit the fucking apartment complexes full of civilians. And all of a sudden, the Zelensky regime is going to have a great photo op. Oh, look at all the dead civilians killed by the fucking Russians. See? See how it works? See what the Zelensky regime is doing? They are deliberately putting civilians in harm's way, either by putting weapons in their hands that they are incapable of competently handling, or else putting heavy weaponry in civilian population zones so that the Russians inadvertently will kill some civilian, and it will lead to a great photo op that will benefit the Zelensky regime. That is evil. It's as simple as that. And I am in Ukraine right now under the authority of the Zelensky regime, a regime that consistently persecutes any critic of it. And I am a foreigner in this country. And I'm saying this publicly, and I don't give a fuck who sees it. And if the Zelensky regime sees this and arrests me and throws me God knows where, well, then you know. And I don't give a fuck, because you have to call out evil when you see it. And this is fucking evil. Simple as that. And I don't give a fuck what people think. One cannot accept evil like this, because it's evil. And I'm sorry if I sound whatever, but it is wrong. I gotta ask chat. I mean, I see you fuckers scrolling through, right? So let me ask you, do you think that putting weapons in the hands of civilians who are not capable and putting heavy weaponry among civilian structures where they will potentially be damaged or destroyed by incoming Russian fire to suppress these heavy weapons, do you think that all of this, in order to get a photo op of dead civilians, do you think that this is immoral? Hit 1 + 1 if you think it is wrong and evil and immoral, and hit 0 if you think it's perfectly fine and the Zelensky regime has all the rights in the world to do this. Please do this. +1 if you think it's evil, 0 if you think it's perfectly fine. I don't see any zeros so far. Oh, so some bloodthirsty faggots, and I'm going to call you a bloodthirsty faggot because that's what you are, capital G and brachial whatever. Yeah, because it's evil. And you have to call evil when you see it. See? I'm a great admirer of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was a great man. He's a man of great moral fortitude. And frankly, I will never be half the man he ever was, but as the model of what to be, he is my model. And he always stood up and said this is evil. And you have to say when something is evil, and this is fucking evil. It's evil to deliberately put civilians at risk so that you can get a guy back. Yeah. And no, it wasn't the Zelensky regime clipping me. It was just an accident on my fucking phone. But I'm sorry if I get a little emotional on this issue. I have recognized over the last couple of days that I'm getting very emotional because I'm extremely stressed out. I'm not stressed out particularly for my own safety. I've thought to myself, well, it was about, let me see now, 10 years ago. Actually, it'll be 10 years ago tomorrow that I experienced the great earthquake of Chile in 2012. It was an 8.8 earthquake. And where I felt it, it was only 8.6. But the one little problem, tiny little problem that happened was that I experienced an 8.6 earthquake, but I was on the 15th floor of a building. Yeah, I was in my apartment. It's a penthouse on the 15th floor on Kennedy Avenue. And dude, the building shook like that, whipped around, okay? The oscillation was at least 3 meters from side to side. It was unbelievable. I couldn't stand up. And I remember very clearly at that moment thinking to myself, this is the moment I can die. This might be it. The building might collapse in this fucking earthquake, and that's that for me. And I was at peace. And I count myself extremely lucky. And since then, I've never been particularly afraid of death because, oh no, by the way, it was 2010, not 2012. Getting old and forgetting shit. But anyway, I was not afraid of death, not because I'm particularly brave. I'm not. I'm very ordinary in that regard. I'm a chicken shit little faggot when I see a horror movie. Oh man, I cover my eyes. I can't stand a horror movie. But I was not afraid at that moment because I was fortunate enough to realize that I had lived my life without regrets. And I think that that's the thing that happens to you when you are dying. You think about the things that you regret not having done. I mean, there's nothing in my life that I have regretted in terms of not doing. There's certainly things I've done that I wish I hadn't done because they were stupid or they didn't work out, but never a regret of not having done something. And I've lived my life that way in every regard. And when I see something as wrong as this, I can't do anything to change it, but I can speak my mind about it in front of an audience. I have quite an audience right now. I have damn, my glasses, my eyesight is shot. 6,200 people. I can't fucking believe you fucking morons are listening to me, man. It's a Sunday. You should be doing something better with your fucking time. Anyway, faggots, I have the luck of having you fools listening to me, so I'll tell you. This is evil. Simple as that. To put people in harm's way for a photo op so that you can say, oh, look at the Russian atrocities and manipulate people's perceptions of events for your benefit. And what it'll cost is the lives of innocent people, innocent, good-hearted people who will pick up a gun thinking that they are doing good, who will pick up a Molotov cocktail thinking that they're doing good, who will nod along and cover up their ears when the big howitzers start shooting rounds so as to get a Russian response that will kill them. It's fucking evil, man. I'm sorry. I mean, quite apart from the Zelensky, repressing his opponents and persecuting other opponents, quite apart from that, the evil of putting innocent people at such danger. Oh, no more chat. Am I gone? I don't see any chat at all. Well, it says that I still have 6,200 people. Oh, there's the chat. There you guys came back. I thought I got clipped. I thought that YouTube decided to kill me. Maybe because of my language, We don't like hate speech. Fucking bastards. You point out evil and you condemn it with the strongest language possible. and they silence your message of condemnation of this evil because you use hate speech. Bastards. Bastards. Simple as that. Anyway, as I was saying, I'm a little bit frazzled over the last couple of days. I know that I'm over emotional because I'm scared. Not scared for myself, as I said. I mean, I've been through worse. And like I said, when I discussed my experience with the earthquake, I'm at peace with myself insofar as everything that I've lived. I don't have any regrets. And I don't regret not having done anything. And none of the things that I did caused any other person harm. I mean, the things I regret having done either caused harm to myself or just were things that, didn't work out, but, nothing major. You know what I mean? And so the point is to see, I'm not afraid for myself. I'm terrified for my children. I'm terrified for them. And I am deeply, deeply unhappy. It's beyond unhappiness. I'm not, it's not depression. It's just, I want to tear my hair out because by circumstances, just trivial bad luck, I came to Kiev right when the invasion started, and my children are in Kharkov. And my son is going to turn 7 in a couple of weeks, and my daughter in June is turning 9. And I love them deeply. I love them with all my heart, and I'm so upset and angry and just wanting to tear my hair out that I can't be with them during this period. Because see, it's not an issue of me being with them, that it's certainly for me emotionally, it's important to be able to see my kids, to know that they're all right. But I recognize that small children, they need to see their father. And it's not that talking to him or anything like that. It's just knowing that he's there. Knowing that the old man, their daddy is right there. And if anything happens, the daddy is there. And 99.99% of the time, the father is not necessary. Okay? But it's just that feeling of security. And I know the fact that they are experiencing this without me is causing them damage. And it weighs on me very, very much, I'll tell you that. And the weight of it has led me to go a little bit around the bend. I'm just deeply, deeply troubled by it. And I recognize that there's nothing I can do. I was discussing this situation with a good friend of mine, Dr. Benway. If you recall, he's my old podcasting partner. He's a great guy. And we were discussing the different options. And he's a very analytical guy, and I trust his judgment. It's an extremely good judgment. Even when I disagree with him, his reasons are always very compelling. He's a very smart man. And we were discussing my situation. And we went through all of the options. And I went through even the nutty options of how I could get to Kharkov. But in the end, none of them were particularly effective. The only really effective solution was to wait out this whole war. And once the dust had settled, one way or the other, only then go back to Kharkov. That in a realistic sense, there is nothing to be done except to wait. And I'm very lucky that my children in Kharkov are safe and sound, and where they are located is perfectly safe, and they'll be perfectly fine. I know that they're in the best shape. I've seen video evidence, and I thank God that there is still communications, internet, cell phone, because I can see pictures of them. I know that they're okay. And I think to myself that if such technology did not exist or it had been interrupted, the gnawing fear. This morning, I woke up bright and early, and I sent some text messages to see if my children were okay. And, it took a while to get a reply. And that wait, which was only a few minutes, it was actually like less than 4 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. But the weight of it, just that short time of waiting, it was horrible. I mean, I will tell you honestly and nakedly, without any kind of, pretense of bravery. Those 3 to 4 minutes were horrible, waiting for the reply, And I was terrified. because I sent the message, the SMS, and you know, like on the Apple app, when you send a message, right, it says delivered underneath, right? But I sent the message and nothing appeared underneath. And I started getting paranoid as to, what horrible thing might have happened to them, you know? And that kind of uncertainty just gnaws at your soul. And of course, my own situation is exceedingly common. I'm not so arrogant as to think I'm particularly special in that regard. There are literally millions of people who are experiencing the exact same thing in Ukraine. Mhm. And this situation, the fear that all these people are experiencing, this fear that's befallen them, it could have been avoided, most definitely. The misery that all of the people in Ukraine are experiencing, not in terms of worried about getting shot, no, worried that the people they love got shot, that the people they love, their children, their brothers, their spouses, their parents, worried that they got shot, that they had some random round of God knows what blow up their building. And all of it could have been avoided. It could have been avoided, but certain greedy people in the West wanted to just fuck with Russia so they could get their way, sometimes for exceedingly egotistical and just arrogant reasons. And other people were fool enough to believe in the empty promises of the West. And well, here we are. Vladimir Putin, on the day of the invasion, gave an exceedingly important speech, the Empire of Lies speech. I think it is one of the most important political speeches in the last half century. Frankly, I can't offhand think of a speech as important as that one. And I'm not kidding, and I'm not being hyperbolic. And I've thought about it over the last 3 days, and I've read the speech repeatedly, and I would suggest you read it. There are versions of it in different sources. All you have to do is just go to the Kremlin website and the Kremlin YouTube channel, rather, and you'll find that speech. It's Vladimir Putin in his office, and it's the Empire of Lies speech. He calls the United States the Empire of Lies. And he's right. And it's that empire of lies that has led us to this situation. And we have a potentially catastrophic war about to unfold across the globe. Now, I'm not going to speculate as to what might happen. I've been going on for nearly 2 hours, and I'm tired, and I want to get some sleep. It's gonna take me a while to unwind from this, this rant that I've been going on. But I just want to tell you that the war that's going on, it's all connected. You see, the Canadian truckers, the Russians invading Ukraine, the horrifying things going on with the transgender and all that, and that kind of just bizarre, manipulation of people's bodies in the most grotesque way imaginable. All of these things are connected. And we are seeing increasingly that there are two camps. One is decadent and degenerate. It is a mentality and ideology that believes in fantasies and storytelling and not reality, and glorifies decadence, degeneracy, infanticide. It's disgusting and despicable as far as I'm concerned. And then there's the other side that glorifies beauty and wholesomeness. It's a side that I'm a part of. Because I look at the degeneracy and decadence, the insane permissiveness, the degradation of the human spirit, the belief that human beings are not individuals of value, but rather cogs, replaceable cogs of a machine. People criticize organizations like the World Economic Forum for having some grand master plan for world domination or some nonsense like that. I don't criticize them for that. I don't criticize them for the will to power. That's perfectly normal. All human beings have that desire to control and to have power over others and of themselves, of course. That's normal. That doesn't bother me. What does bother me is that they approach people as cogs, fungible cogs, identical one to the other, and completely divorced from any kind of rootedness in human connections. They don't consider the human spirit. They look at love as mere lust. They don't understand human connection. They don't believe in human connection. They believe that people, rather than having deep-rooted human connections to one another, are really circuits that can be pulled apart and put back together again, like Legos. They believe in the Lego model of people, where all the people are exactly the same, only their colors are different. But they are structurally exactly the same, and they snap together and they can be broken apart and put into different shapes. No rootedness. It's not organic. It's not wholesome. They believe in fantasies and stories. And I look through social media and I hear all their rantings and ravings and stories that have no correspondence to reality. And I find it disgusting and despicable because it's just an empire of lies. I want no part of such a world. I want to be a part of a wholesome world that seeks beauty and truth and wholesomeness and seeks to create a world where our children grow healthy and happy, confident in who they are, secure in the love of the people around them. That's the kind of world that I want to be a part of. I want no part of this disgusting, decadent, degenerate regime that is being forcibly imposed on me and the rest of the world. I think it's repulsive and decadent and horrifying. And I hate it most of all because it is filled with lies and it knows no such thing as love. And that's all I have to say.